Glowing red eyes, an unmasculine voice, he reads too fast and likes old comic book stories, he edits poorly, he mashes.
Our story begins with a bold and honest assertion. Out of the frozen north came a dread thing that was neither man nor beast, a monster without a soul that killed without remorse and gave no quarter. You'll thrill to this fearful story of the undead, of a nameless terror that went loping through the night in the full of the moon, with its crimes black upon it. Yes. Welcome to this episode of Murder Incorporated. This is episode number 2. In this episode, we humbly bring you a timeless classic in horror comics called The Werewolf Stalks. This comes to us from the pages of Adventures into the Unknown, Issue 1, published in October of 1948. It was published by the American Comics Group. It is very rare. This is an independent production. Please like, comment, subscribe, share, donate, and visit our merchandise store. Every little bit helps. In the frozen timberlands of northern Canada, a gaunt, giant gray killer stands at bay. 3 men have a large wolf surrounded and are attempting to snare it with lasso and deadly rifles. "Careful, lads," one cautions. "I've got him covered." The beast springs to the attack, pouncing on one of its assailants. Another of the hunters fires. Shortly, as one ties the noble wolf and another helps him, as a third stands ready with his smoking rifle, the fourth lay dead. "Pierre, oh, the poor devil, those wicked shadows wrecked my aim." "We've got him," one says as they work the knots. "Bring the crate. Hurry," another says as he brushes snow off his trousers. 2 more men bring forth a large wooden crate. "They're right up ahead. They must have roped the brute," one notes. "Biggest timber wolf I ever saw. Vicious. If it leaped for a man's throat," another began, before witnessing the horror. The crate said, "John Wilder, zoological importer." "We took the beast alive," John Wilder explains to the 2 newcomers. "But at what a price. I've been caging and selling beasts for 20 years. But every time a man is killed, I feel like a murderer." He is told, "It wasn't your fault, Mr. Wilder. The brute moved faster than its shadow." But at that moment, in a nearby cabin, an old, stocky man with a pipe burning at his mouth asks, "A wreath of garlic. What would that do, woman?" She wears red and has shoulder-length black hair. She is young and pretty and strong-willed. She explains, "Werewolves fear garlic. What was it we heard howling last night? It began as a wolf's cry, but it turned into the cruel laughter of a man. Jock's laughter." In the bleak North Country, ancient beliefs die slowly. From old France, the settlers brought with them a mortal fear of the undead. She tells him, "I tell you it was Jock the logger. He was bitten by a wolf, then disappeared. If it was a werewolf that bit him, he's become a werewolf himself. He was cruel, brutal, even as a man. He roams the timber as a wolf." Later that night at John Wilder's camp, "He's a magnificent beast, Barbara. Zoos are plenty greedy for timber wolves. We'll get a good price for him in the States. But I can't forget that we captured him at the cost of a human life." I'm terribly sorry, dear," Barbara consoles him. "Let's call it a night." In a steel cage, the mighty wolf sits patiently, staring through the bars until it is finally alone. Alone, a ghastly transformation finally comes. After some moments, part man and part wolf still, the creature starts to talk to himself. I'm changing back. No longer a wolf. I am Jock. Cage me like a beast, would they?" He then laughs. "I'll claw their throats out. Jock, finally human and in full control of his slim fingers, slips his hand through the cage bars and easily slides the lock away. He opens the door and plodded out across the snow, away from his temporary jail, into the quiet darkness. Half an hour later, he stands over a sleeping woman. The wife of the man whom caged me. When she bears the claw marks of the undead, she will run like a beast through the timber. Her hands will become claws, her face. Barbara awakens and screams. "Help, help, let me go," she screams. John Wilder awakens quickly, but not quickly enough. "Barbara, she's gone," he says. He hears her shout as she's dragged into the forest. "Help, John!" "My God, he's a giant," John Wilder says to himself as he sees Jock carrying Barbara into the distance. He gives chase with his small pistol. John Wilder gains on the two but hesitates to fire. Jock drops Barbara and tackles the smaller man in one brutal and fluid motion. John Wilder manages to fire, saying, "You devil, take that!" Jock is injured. A bullet has torn into his shoulder. He pushes John aside and rushes into the trees. "I've got to get this wound dressed," Jock murmurs to himself as he follows deeper into the thick brush. "I'll die if I don't get to a doctor. I'm in bad shape, losing strength fast." Jock then begins to turn to a wolf again. He laughs in exhaustion, musing on the experience. No control over it. How can I get a doctor to help me if I'm a beast without a voice? I'd be killed on sight. Trapped and desperate, the ghastly, part man and part wolf monstrosity has an idea and returns to its cage. He says to himself in a twisted and distorted voice, "I'll get the wound dressed. As a wolf. Only chance. He won't know I was the man he shot. A man like him doesn't believe in werewolves." And the change was so deep that he could no longer form human words. The camp is suddenly aroused by an agonized howling. "Wounded," John Wilder says. "I remember now. My gun went off twice when I struggled with that lumberjack. A stray bullet must have lodged in the beast." Moments later, John and another man had restrained the big timber wolf and were attempting to soothe it and fix its wound. John was saying, "There, I've got the bullet out and sterilized the wound. Those dressings will have to be changed once a day, but I guess I can handle it." The other man replied, "In a week you'll be at sea, sir. It will be tough on you if he turns ugly with a rolling deck under him." 10 days later, they were finally approaching the Golden Gate, San Francisco, California. Barbara was recovered and in a pretty yellow dress. She was looking forward to being on dry land again. The sea trip was even worse than the cold, dark wilds of Canadian forests. She was saying, "The beast's wound must be nearly healed. I believe I've made friends with it. It never snarls at me. I'm going to see if—" "What's that?" It began to change in front of her. "It's not a wolf. It's not a wolf. A human face and—" "Oh!" She was screaming. She runs. She runs out of the cabin door. She runs down the deck of the ship. She screams. She's been screaming. She yells, "John! John, help!" She then falls downstairs, and within the hour, she rests uncomfortably. The ship's doctor is telling John, "The ship's docking. You'd better get her into a taxi." She was shaken up a bit, but she'll be all right now. She saw a shadow, and in her nervous state, well, you know how women are. "I think I do, doctor," John replies. 10 days later at a West Coast zoo, "I never saw a more vicious-looking beast," a girl is saying to her date. She was quite right. "Look at him," she continued. "He'd like to get at us. A beast like that could kill a man with a single blow." And that night, Jock the werewolf slipped out of his cage again. Yes. On the sleeping city, a ghastly terror falls. A terror of rending claws slashing out of the darkness, of running feet, of screams that start and end abruptly as though choked off, and over all the shadow of something monstrous, and as merciless as the Arctic night. But because a werewolf cannot cross running water of its own volition, a crowd of police are catching up to it. One boasts to his partner, "There it goes, Monahan. It's the escaped wolf. I'll blast the viciousness out of it." Bullets riddle the big wolf. Later that night in John Wilder's home, he tells Barbara, "I'm going upstairs to bed. I'm sorry the wolf escaped, but my responsibility ended when I sold it to the zoo. If you want to sit here listening to that radio blare, go ahead. You know as well as I do, the wolf had nothing to do with those slayings." She answers coldly, "It did have something to do with them, John." She said, "I tell you I'm frightened. It wasn't a shadow I saw on the ship. Why won't you believe me? The werewolf legend is as old as mankind. There must be some truth in it." Terror-fraught moments later, she is still sitting in front of the television news. It screams out at her, "The wolf has been wounded. The details are just coming in. Apparently it got away, but..." "Wounded," Barbara exclaims. "When it was wounded before, John dressed the wound. What if it should come here? If it's really a werewolf, it will know the way." Suddenly she hears scratching on their wide bay windows. Startled and frightened, she turns to see the wolf on the other side of the glass, mere yards away. She yells, "There's something at the window. Something out there. Something's out there." The wolf manages to open the glass double doors and plods toward her. She yells again, "John! John! Help me!" She backs away and it takes her dress into its mouth, ripping it from her. She screams, "Help me, John!" She hears John beside her. He too is panicked. He tells her as calmly as he can muster, "Barbara, keep backing away from it. I've got to get to that table." He grabs something from an end table. "I've got it," he yells. "A silver letter opener. Back, Barbara, here he comes." The wolf attacks him. As they struggle, John pants, "I'm done for if he gets my throat. I've got to get him first." John stabs the monster through the heart. John exclaims, "Merciful heavens, look!" The big timber wolf slowly returns to its human shape. Jacques is finally fully revealed. In death, Jacques sheds the mark of the beast and finds release from his torment. "A silver knife," Barbara says. "Anything silver is fatal to the undead. You knew? But you didn't believe in the undead. What opened your eyes?" John Wilder replies, "Sheer desperation, I guess. I didn't want to lose you, darling."